Chapter 1, The Invitation. It started with a letter. A crisp envelope, yellowed at the edges, appeared in Mark's mailbox one cold November morning. There was no stamp, no return address, just his name scrawled in spidery ink. Inside, the note read, "Mark. The house on Blackwood Lane calls to you. You must come before the first snowfall. Bring no one. E." Mark shivered, though not from the cold. Blackwood Lane was a street that did not exist anymore, at least, not officially. The city maps showed nothing but an overgrown stretch of land where the road had once been, leading into a forest that had swallowed the remnants of an old Victorian mansion. He had heard stories, whispers in bars and in the hushed tones of elderly townsfolk. They called it the Whispering House, a place where voices were heard in the walls, where shadows moved without light, where people went in but did not come out. And yet, something deep in his bones compelled him. That night, he packed a flashlight, a pocket knife, and the letter, then set off for Blackwood Lane. The road was still there, buried under years of neglect, leading him through gnarled trees that clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Then, suddenly, the house emerged, looming, crumbling, yet impossibly standing. Its windows were hollow eyes. Its door stood ajar, as if waiting. A whisper, soft, insidious, brushed against his ear. "Welcome home, Mark." Chapter 2, The Door That Breathes. The moment Mark stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him. Dust swirled in the moonlight streaming through broken windows. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else. Something wet. The whispering began almost immediately. Faint at first, like the rustling of dry leaves. But soon, it grew, shifting into distinct words spoken in voices that overlapped and slithered through the walls. "He's here. He came back. We remember you." Mark's breath hitched. He reached for his phone, no signal. The air around him felt wrong, as if the house itself was breathing, the wooden floor subtly rising and falling beneath his feet. Then, something moved. From the farthest corner of the room, beyond the collapsed chandelier and the skeletal remains of furniture, a shadow detached itself from the wall. It was human-shaped but wrong, its limbs stretched too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Mark backed away, but the whispering voices only grew more excited. "Stay. Listen. Join us." His pulse thundered in his ears. He turned to run, but the floorboards curled like fingers, trapping his feet. The figure crept closer, its voice merging with the others. "You should never have come back." Chapter 3, The Room of Echoes. Mark wrenched free, stumbling into a side hallway. The house shifted, the walls seeming to stretch and bend as he ran. Doorways yawned open to his left and right, revealing glimpses of impossible things, a woman with black holes for eyes, a child floating inches above the floor, a figure that looked exactly like Mark staring back at him. He bolted through a door at random, slamming it behind him. The room was small, suffocating. A single mirror stood against the far wall, covered in claw marks. Mark's reflection stared back at him, but something was wrong. His reflection's mouth was moving, whispering. Then, the words became clear. "Mark. Don't turn around." His blood turned to ice. Something was standing right behind him. Chapter 4, The Forgotten Name. He spun, but there was nothing there, only darkness pressing against the edges of his vision. The whispers returned, rising to a fever pitch, filling his head with memories he didn't recognize. A house. A family. His family. Laughter turned to screams. Blood on the walls. And then a name. His name? Ethan. Mark staggered. No, his name was Mark. Wasn't it? The whispers coiled tighter, suffocating him. His reflection in the mirror grinned at him. "You forgot, didn't you?" The house shook. The walls began to crack, bleeding something black and thick. The floor beneath him vanished, and he was falling, falling into the gaping mouth of the house itself. Chapter 5, The Whispering Never Ends. Mark, Ethan? Awoke in the dark. The house was silent now. Heavy. Watching. He was not alone. Shadows stood around him, their faces blurred, their voices quiet now, waiting. And then he understood. He had never visited the house. He had always been here. He was part of it, just like the others, whispering from the walls, waiting for the next visitor. The door creaked open once more. Footsteps echoed in the entryway. Another had come. Mark's lips moved on their own, his voice merging with the others, a whisper that slid through the air like silk. Welcome home.